Me, 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 me. Hoo-doo, hoo-doo. Pew, pew, pew.
I put the
11,
coffee down. I put
11.
the coffee down.
Benevolent
The lizard
elephants.
owes me money. The
11.
lizard owes me money. I will not buy that squirrel from you. I will not buy that squirrel from you.
I will not buy this tobacconist. It is scratched.
I will not buy this tobacconist. It is scratched.
Yes. No, my hovercraft is full of eels. Well, welcome to all the guys, gals, and non-binary pals out there. Those are our vocal warm-ups for our episode of Science Actually Presents The Nerd and the Scientist, brought to you by your favorite nerds / scientists, Benjamin Salas, and me, Kovi Rose. I'm the other guy. Welcome.
Welcome. That was fun. I like when we do Shakespearean little warm-ups like that. That was nice.
Yes. Shakespearean, Pythonian, all the good stuff.
Yeah, all the onions. It's good stuff. It's a whole big dish, like a big mixing bowl, like a dish of ridiculous things that brought us to where we are today, to make us think the way we do.
But what's another word for a thing that brings you to a place where you're trying to get to?
Train.
Yeah, I guess it could be a train, it could be a car, it could be a Segway.
Segway.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were talking about dishes.
On purpose, because it was a very bad segue. Kind of like,
I think
like a T-shirt or something. Instead of saying like "Come for the science, stay for the laughing," it's like "Come for the science, ignore the segues."
Please ignore.
We know they're bad.
I think at a certain point we shouldn't even try. Sorry.
Anyway.
Yes. Go on, Benjamin. What were you thinking about?
Well,
what's on your mind?
As we were talking about what should our next episode be, and here we are. We were thinking about radio telescopes and radio astronomy, something that Kovi does for a living, and something that's actually kind of neat. I don't know where a lot of you people live, but out roundabout where I live, near Stanford, there's something right off the freeway called the Dish. It is the 7th biggest radio telescope antenna on Earth. It was the 8th, but then Arecibo fall down, go boom, and now it's the 7th. It's quite large, and you're allowed to walk up pretty close to it. There's a little sign that says you can't go past that sign, and I've crossed it because I'm a rule breaker like that. And I thought maybe it'd be a fun thing to talk about. I dropped my baseball bat.
Oh no. For people who didn't listen to season 1, baseball bat is an important tool that Benjamin keeps by for emotional support during these episodes, especially when we touch on kind of chilling existential problems like the universe in general. So it's always good to have your emotional support baseball bat right there with you. But yes, radio telescopes, for folks who are listening for the very first time, hello. Welcome to our podcast. But yes, I am currently doing my PhD in astrophysics, and I work with radio telescopes. And radio telescopes, for those who don't know, are just like regular telescopes, except completely different. I know. Rather than collecting visible light that we're used to seeing, that has, light has wavelength. So, rather than visible light, which has wavelengths in nanometers or hundreds of nanometers, Radio light has wavelengths of centimeters, millimeters, or in some case meters. So it's basically the same light, the same electromagnetic radiation, just much longer waves spread out longer. And before anybody asks, even though you can't ask because this is a podcast and we do the asking and the answering, radio astronomy has nothing to do with sound. A lot of people think about radio waves and they think, oh, well, I know the radio that gives me music in my car, so radio must be sound. But the radio signals that you get in your car is basically just using electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, to send packages of signals, and those signals, when they're converted by your radio, your car radio, converts that into sound through the speaker. So radio waves, just another form of light, slightly different. How am I going so far, Benjamin?
Nice. That's nice. See? Learning. Let's see how much Kovi knows about the primary tool of his PhD studies, the radio telescope.
Oh, God. I'm worried. Didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
Not going to be a quiz, but just an interesting little factoid. Do you know when the concept of radio astronomy was first stumbled upon? It was done on accident, as most great discoveries are.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure, and I really hope nobody from my research group or future employers are listening to this, but
yes,
from memory, I want to say that it was in the 1930s, a fellow by the name of Karl Jansky.
Yes.
And I think Karl Jansky was maybe working for Bell Labs.
Wow.
And Benjamin knows, by the way, I did zero prep for today's episode.
He did. He's staring off into the void, like, please let me be right. Please let me be right. And he's nailing it so far.
Yeah. So Karl Jansky in the 30s working for Bell Labs, and they were doing there was basically some noise in the background that they just couldn't figure out.
Right.
And they're like, why is there this weird noise in this, radio signal that we're trying to process? And I think it's because they're working on, telegraph technology. Like radio for communications was a thing already for a few years. And so, if I'm not mistaken, in the early days of radio astronomy, there were two big noise sources. One was the sun, and the other one, which I believe was the one in this case, it was the radio emission or the radio light coming from the supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, Sagittarius A star. Is that it? Yeah?
Yeah.
God damn. It's like,
he got it.
Touch him out.
10 points for Kovi. Whoop, whoop. Just a few years later.
Grote Rober?
Grote Rober. There you go. 26-year-old engineer named Grote Rober in Wheaton, Illinois, built the very first dish antenna radio telescope in 1937. And the parts he used to build it. This is the best. Some wooden rafters. Write this down, everybody. Galvanized sheet metal.
Wooden rafters.
And spare parts from a Ford Model T truck. Can you believe that? With those Model pieces, he put together the very first 31-foot diameter telescope. So 31 feet in meters that's different.
I think it's about 10 meters.
Yeah. A bit less. Well, yeah. I'm 6.5 feet tall, and I'm 2 meters tall, which is my measuring stick. Oh, how many me's is that? Times 2 meters.
Immediately, we should file a petition to get all radio telescopes in the world reclassified in terms of their Benjaminian units of measurement.
We'll just call them bennies. Hey, move.
Hey, yes. Moving on. Yes, shoot.
No, that was just there have been a series of pretty big discoveries thanks to radio telescopes, radio astronomy, and I was wondering if there's anything that was a favorite of yours. I found a list of some pretty big discoveries that radio telescopes have done, uh, and I can read them off if you like. But if you'd like to shout out one or two that you like or that have really, struck a chord with you, share with the class.
I think so. I need to give a little bit of background, um, which is that so a lot of the radio telescopes, like the dish that you were talking about near you, and other famous single dish radio telescopes around the world, are as they sound. They're a single dish that kind of in a similar way conceptually to a traditional telescope. Um, they are focusing light, in this case radio light, using a dish to a single focal point, capturing it, doing all sorts of signal processing and blah blah blah, and then you get an image. But the thing is that your resolution, your angular resolution, right? So angular resolution is like if you see two lights that are next to each other that are far far away, they'll look like one light. And the better your angular resolution, the better your eyes can separate the small angle between those two distant bright points. So so for radio telescopes, for all telescopes, I guess, really, your angular resolution is it's inversely proportional to the diameter. So that means that the bigger the diameter, the bigger your collecting area, the better your angular resolution. And the problem is, when you're building these massive dishes, the bigger they get, at a certain point, gravity says, no more. It becomes a huge engineering challenge to actually build bigger and bigger dishes. And so the great thing about radio astronomy is that we have this thing called a radio interferometer, where rather than building, just a stupendously massive single dish, we can build a bunch of smaller dishes, spread them over a wide area, and then you can digitally connect or correlate their signals together to synthetically create as if you had one large telescope, right? So there's, a telescope that's kind of in early stages at the moment called the Square Kilometer Array, or the SKA. And the idea is SKA, at least in a theoretical sense, obviously the specific details are slightly different, but the idea is build a bunch of telescopes, small ones, around a square kilometer area, and then when you connect all the signals, it's as if you have a single kilometer by kilometer telescope. Okay, so with all that background, with all that exposition, I think the coolest discovery that we have made, and we're kind of coming full circle from Carl Jansky's accidental discovery of the radio light that's just generally coming from the black hole at the center of our galaxy, is the fact that we have this thing called the Event Horizon Telescope, right, the EHT, that is a radio interferometer that connects telescopes, that connects signals from telescopes all around the Earth, meaning that the effective size, the effective diameter of that telescope is the diameter of the Earth. Right, exactly. So by creating a telescope that digitally at least has the same diameter as the Earth, we get crazy, crazy good angular resolution. And that's how we were able to get a radio image of the black hole itself, of that beautiful donut-shaped ring of radio light coming from all the material around the black hole. We've done this with M87 and also with Sagittarius A star. So I think that to me is the coolest single discovery. Even though it's we knew what we should be expecting to see, and it wasn't like something like new and groundbreaking conceptually. It was just like we've proven how good we can push this, how far we can push this. So yeah, that's a a long-winded answer to a very short question.
Yeah, great. I like. Do you know when the very first radio astronomy imaging took place. The very first thing a picture was developed from radio imaging.
Was this something that happened in Australia?
No, it was in space. You get it? Because anyway, I don't know if it was done from Australia, but I know who did the radar imaging, and I know when it was, and I know what it was.
All right, let's hear it.
Nah, I'm kidding. It was from Arecibo, so not Australia. In 1989, Scott Hudson and Stephen Ostro were the first people to take a photo, as it were, of asteroid 4769 Castalia. It was the very first image put together with data taken from radio telescopes, and they even were able to build not just a image of it, but a three-dimensional model of it as they tracked it and followed its movements. They could also see it as it tumbled, and
Oh
they got
wow.
all the signs more or less in crude 1989 style.
Yeah, I often complain about the imaging software that I use for my radio astronomy work, and I'm sure that it's much better and much more efficient than whatever they were using in 1989. So I shouldn't complain.
Shouldn't complain. Shouldn't complain. I'm sure someone from '89, these two guys, Scott Hudson and Steve Ostro, will see what you're doing and think, "My God, that's amazing."
It's amazing.
So it goes both ways.
Inconceivable. Yes, no, this is true. Cool. I'm liking this episode. Whole episode about radio astronomy. It's great.
Oh yeah, I got more.
Although I hope,
You know, since you brought up
yes.
a radio telescope array, not including the Event Horizon telescope, which is kind of a cheat because it connects all the radio telescopes around the world into one singular pseudo telescope. But do you know what the biggest radio telescope array is? There are a few contenders. It's kind of tricky, but yeah.
Okay. So in terms of things that have already been built.
Yes, I know it's coming next. That's being proposed.
Okay. So the VLA, which is an acronym for the Very Large Array.
Yes.
I'll just leave that there and not comment on it. So the Very Large Array in New Mexico, I think it's probably the current winner. Is that right?
Currently, yes.
About
the
8.5.
Very Large Array is the biggest telescope array in New Mexico with 27 antennas or dishes, each of them 25 meters across.
Oh, so
so it has
you're
the
measuring
most
size,
and it
okay.
also, well, kind of the most antennas. There's another one, but the antennas are well, we'll get there. They're all in contention.
So to like connect it back to what I was saying before about angular resolution. So in order to get that good resolution, you need to have these large distances between your antennas. And so I think the furthest distance, these are called baselines, when you like connect a distance between any two pairs of radio dishes in one of these big radio interferometers. So the longest baseline is like 8.5 kilometers or something like that for the VLA. For the Meerkat radio telescope in South Africa, I think it's about 8 kilometers, the longest distance between dishes. And then in Australia, we've got ASCAP, the Australian SK Pathfinder, which is a big one, which I use a lot. And I think the longest distance there is it's probably a little bit lower. I think ASCAP and then also ATCA, the Australian Telescope Compact Array, are both probably around 6 kilometers, the longest distance. But the SKA is going to be massive.
It's going to be pretty big.
Yeah, like 10 times that.
Yeah, 197 dishes. Well, that's the square kilometer one.
Damn. Hot damn.
Want to give a shout out to India? Yeah.
The GMRT?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has 30 antennas.
It's a lot of antennas.
Each of them 45 meters across. Spread over a total length of 25 kilometers, 16 miles. And it's not the biggest. It's just beautifully spread out.
It's an incredible feat of engineering, and both in terms of like the physical hardware, but also the digital infrastructure. Because these things, like you're basically getting like an electrical signal that's hitting the telescope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need to, like, a voltage, and you need to record that voltage, and like with really, really good precision record when that voltage hit the telescope.
Right.
Because it's like you need to have that timing information from all of these different dishes to actually connect the signals together properly. So it's like crazy signal processing as well as the like physical building of this stuff. Just wild.
That's great. I like it.
He approves.
I do approve. Because they're so far apart, you have to know when the light from the object you're looking at hits each one, because that's actually going to be a bit different.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, you get it. You get it. That's it. You're an honorary radio astronomer.
Yeah. See. Mom wanted me to be a doctor, like a medical doctor, so she's not going to be very happy yet. But I'm on the way. Hey, Kovi.
Hey, Benjamin.
Are you comfortable?
Yes.
Good. Because I'd like you to dive into the comfort of radio telescope underwear, where cosmic innovation meets everyday luxury. Crafted with materials inspired by the wonders of the universe, our briefs provide unmatched support and style. Plus, with advanced technology that can detect when it's time to go from light years away, you'll always be prepared for your next celestial adventure. Upgrade your wardrobe and embrace the cosmic comfort of radio telescope underwear today. Reach for the stars.
I'm so confused, but I love it. So are these radio telescope briefs constructed of the same materials that Rober used to construct the radio telescope?
I hope not. Those would have splinters because
yes,
are wood. That would suck.
Wood, sheet metal, and bits of an old Ford Model T.
Parts
the
of a
3
truck.
key ingredients.
Well, duh. I was all impressed. For science, actually, check it out on Facebook, I made a top 10 list of the world's biggest radio telescopes. And they're beautiful. They're these huge, huge Titanic structures. And they've, as Kovi mentioned earlier, gravity plays a huge role. You get to a certain point that they're so big, the engineering behind keeping these things from collapsing in on themselves is insane. So that we've turned to building them into craters or into mountain ranges around the world, using the earth itself to hold these things up. And they're massive, massive, beautiful things. And really all you need is a few pieces of wood and an old truck. I mean, that sucks. That, or there's a lot of old trucks being repurposed around the world.
Can I also point out one other thing about that ad that I guess I have questions because it said these radio telescope briefs can predict when you need to go from light years away.
Yeah.
Now,
Which means
either
they've told you.
ChatGPT is making the same mistake that George Lucas made and is conflating an astronomical unit of distance with a unit of time because they sound similar, or somehow there's a radio telescope on a distant solar system light years away that is watching the briefs
Yeah.
and predicting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're slowly tiptoeing into the dark matter. But
So
yes, let's not.
basically, there's somebody in another solar system somewhere else watching my underwear,
Yes.
and they're saying something along the lines of, "This guy went to the bathroom 2,000 years ago." Because, like, that's a new branch of archaeology,
Yeah.
radioarchaeology. Cool. He invented it right here on Science Actually Presents.
Radio archaeology. There is galactic archaeology.
Really?
Yeah. There
Oh,
are
wow.
actually there are a bunch of really interesting crossovers. I know this is not quite on theme for this week's episode, but in the spirit of astronomy, so there is galactic archaeology in the sense that you're studying the history of the Milky Way. So the Milky Way formed in part from kind of these smaller satellite or dwarf galaxies eventually colliding with the Milky Way and merging. But, the stars from that satellite galaxy are different. They have, started differently, evolved differently. So by looking at the chemical composition of different groups of stars, you can identify streams of stellar regions that came from a different beginning than the rest of the stars that formed in the Milky Way. So there's that sort of galactic archaeology. There's like this kind of like high energy particle physics side of archaeology that they do with like cosmic rays and real archaeology on Earth, where people will look to see, what the saturation level is, or like different levels of cosmic irradiation for different materials that are buried deep underground, and they can tell what the activity of cosmic radiation hitting the Earth was during that time period. So like galactic archaeology, definitely a thing. It's
Definitely a
real.
thing.
Yeah. Oh, we could probably do a whole episode on that separately.
Noted.
I feel like every conversation Benjamin and I have, whether it's on air or offline, is just like me saying interesting things because I know random facts, and Benjamin saying, we should spend half an hour talking about that. And me saying, absolutely yes.
Yeah. That's this whole show. Just I have my own private astrophysicist to tell me stuff I like to listen to, and I'm happy. That's the whole thing. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like going to school, but like no tests. It's great.
No
You should
test.
try it. Try it,
Love
people.
it. I've gone to school for long enough. I don't think I will try it. I've been going to school for years. How much more can I do?
You're doing it for fun.
Yes, I'm very fortunate in that way. But yes, speaking of my schooling, what else did you read up about radio telescopes? What else did you want to ask?
I was going in my reading about the Square Kilometer Array Observatory, SK or SKAO, in
Or
Australia.
SCA?
SCA. The prop. It's it's being built, or it's proposed, or it's not yet started to be built, but the proposition is 197 dishes inside a single square kilometer, which would create a massive collecting area of 33,000 square meters, or 300, or is it 35,000 or 355,000 square feet? Huge,
How many
huge.
square bennies is that?
15,000.
15,000.
16.5 thousand square pennies. Yep. It's accurate. Look it up, people. It's on Google. Um, but there's a
What can I tell
problem
you?
with
Yes. What's the problem?
SCA, and it's SpaceX. Apparently, the Starlink satellites, the ever-growing constellation of Starlink satellites, is creating enough interference that it's going to block or make very difficult the readings
Hmm.
that SCA would be getting. And I'm wondering, question for you, how severe is that interference today with what you do?
Yeah. Okay. So there are a lot of questions for me to unpack there.
Oh
Um,
boy.
or geez, oh
Ah,
geez.
jeez. I give a bunch
Uh,
of questions, don't you know?
oh, don't you know? How would that? So the SKA. Um, I don't work for the SKA. I don't represent them. So apologies in advance if I get any of the specific details a little bit off. But generally speaking, the way that this was designed was as a huge international collaboration led by the SKAO, the SKA Observatory organization, and they have centers in the UK, in South Africa, and in Australia. They also have um, data resource centers all around in all the countries I mentioned, and also in China. Um, and basically, this is a huge international collaboration, both in terms of pooling resources and also in terms of uh, building telescopes in different places. Um, and so, two of the main telescopes that are being built as part of the SKA are in South Africa and in Western Australia, um, and that's the SKA mid and the SKA low. So they're slightly different observing frequencies. Mid is the kind of middle of the band, and low is a slightly lower observing frequency, so a slightly longer wavelength. And in both South Africa and in Western Australia, they've built these Pathfinder telescopes, where basically, SKA was planned, it was approved, and then as a first step, they build these Pathfinder radio telescopes that test out both the observing strategy and the technology, and a few other things for when the actual SKA is finally complete. Right? Because you don't want to embark on this massive thing of building tens or hundreds of dishes before you really know, what the best way to use such an array is. So, respectively, that's ASCAP, the Australian SKA Pathfinder in Western Australia, or the traditional name for the land is Inyarimana Ilgari Bundara, which is the indigenous name that was given to the observatory. And in South Africa, it's the Meerkat telescope. So you have Meerkat and ASCAP. And in a sense, ASCAP and Meerkat are going to form part of the SKA when the rest of the SKA is built. So they'll connect the signals together. But they have already finished building they've uh, they've done the groundbreaking ceremony and all that. So they're in the process of building these additional antennas that are going to be connected to these existing Pathfinder telescopes. And the Pathfinders have been kind of going full steam for a few years now. So most of the science that I've been fortunate enough to work on has been using ASCAP and a little bit using Meerkat as well. So that's kind of the first half of the question about SKA. Do you want me to go into the Starlink and interference
Yes.
thing?
I want to know how Starlink is taking everything you just said and making a mess of
Yeah. So
it.
so in the same way that optical telescopes need to be built in these kind of low light pollution areas, away from the big city lights, and away from the you know the lights that can interfere with the how well you can see things, or how some telescopes are just built in space so that you don't even have to deal with light pollution. In the same way, radio telescopes are very sensitive to radio light pollution. So there have been some cases going way back where there were microwave signals from nearby to the observatory that were misinterpreted as an extraterrestrial signal. Most of the signage around radio telescopes, like the sign that you might have noticed at the dish in Stanford, is to avoid people bringing their mobile phones, bringing their cell phones, and introducing additional interference.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm still
So,
gonna go there.
so a big part of the work that's been done with these Pathfinder telescopes, and a friend of mine from my research group, Leroy Lorenzo, has been doing incredible work in both monitoring this radio frequency interference, or RFI, and also figuring out ways to mitigate it. So there are various kind of like technical and software ways that you can identify when a signal is from something coming from Earth versus coming from space, what it looks like, what frequency it's coming in at, where on the telescope it's being detected. But like, it's really hard. Like, Leroy has done his entire PhD on this topic for this one telescope. And what's frustrating with Starlink is that, we're meant to be able to observe and do radio astronomy at like specific wavelengths, at specific frequencies where like nothing else is meant to be broadcasting. However, people still do broadcast at those frequencies, and in the case of Starlink, even though they have, to their credit, they are trying to broadcast their communications frequencies at outside of our observing band, there is radio light that leaks out from these satellites. So even though we're not, seeing the cross chatter from the Starlink satellites to each other or to Earth, there's this ambient radio light coming off them that we continue to detect. And as they launch more and more of them, we're seeing more and more of this stuff. And like with any telescope, when you're using the telescope to discover transient events, these ephemeral, random things that happen in space, and for the most part will happen over a very short period of time and then never happen again. So like if you're talking about, a supernova, fine, it flares up over a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months. If you're talking about a star flaring, maybe that's over a couple of hours or down to a few minutes. But when you're talking about a pulsar or a fast radio burst, these bursts last for milliseconds. So if a Starlink satellite is crossing over the path, you're losing everything. You're potentially missing the entire interesting thing that you're looking for. So it definitely represents quite a large problem for all astronomers, not just for radio astronomers. But we're continuing to work with, amazing physics/engineer people who are trying to solve this problem. So yes, I know that was kind of a long response, but there's a lot, as I said, to unpack about this whole issue.
That was a good one. I'm learning. That's the whole point. Okay.
Learning is good.
Learning is good. Well, thanks a lot, Elon, for just mucking up all of Kovi's hard work his whole life. And then this guy just shows up. That's my representation of the noise that Kovi's getting from spacelink satellites.
I like talking about radio astronomy. I think it's really cool.
I get that feeling. I get that feeling.
Was it that obvious? But there are definitely people who know a lot more about radio astronomy than I do. As I said, I'm just doing my PhD. There are people who did their PhDs, a while ago, and they've had years of experience with the radio astronomy. There are some incredible people who I was at an event last night where there were some people who built some of these early radio telescopes in Australia with their bare hands, pretty much, and it's just like that whole generation who designed and physically built these early radio telescopes and came up with the software that we all take for granted today. So if I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to that, the early kind of pioneers of radio astronomy.
That's cool.
No, you're cool.
No, you're cool.
No, you're
Are a lot of these old original hand-built telescopes still up and running today?
So the Malongolo telescope that I mentioned in one of our previous episodes, so that was only very recently officially kind of went kaput. I think they closed it mostly because of funding and like the lack of funding for maintenance. It still works. It still could work. That was built in 1965. So that was a loss. The Parkes radio telescope, which is, well, we call it the dish. I know that you said that you have your dish, but the Parkes radio telescope or Parkes Observatory was probably built even before Malongolo. So Malongolo is like an interesting sort of interferometer, but the dish, the Parkes dish, is a single dish, and it was built probably like 1960, 1961. And it's just this single massive, like 60 odd meter dish, like 200 feet diameter, single dish. It's still being used today very actively. I think most of the pulsars that we know about, like all of pulsars, like there are several thousand pulsars that have been discovered. I think probably the majority of them have been discovered using Parkes. So it's an incredible instrument. People are still doing upgrades to it now and continuing to new generations of scientists are learning, doing their PhDs and continuing to do research with it. It was also used, I think it was used in part for the Apollo 11 transmission. I think it's part of like the Deep Space Network that is used to communicate with NASA satellites. So I think, I think they used Parkes and then also the smaller antenna down the road from Parkes at Honeysuckle Creek. Not down the road; it's a little bit away, but yeah, Parkes was involved in the broadcast of the Apollo 11 landing. So yeah,
It's difficult to adjust something that big, which is built to listen to very, 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 very soft, quiet sounds.
It's just
to
like
start
it's
listening
over
to something
here.
I assume considerably louder, like a
Oh, I thought you meant the
television
physical
broadcast.
adjustment of like turning the whole thing and it's going.
That's
The adjustment that you're asking about, the frequency adjustment, I don't know. That's a really good question. I feel like it wouldn't be major. I imagine it's at most just swapping out the receiver that's at the focal point, so that you're just getting a different bandwidth of frequencies. And I don't think so. I think Parkes also has a fairly wide bandwidth of frequencies that it can observe at already, so probably wasn't.
cool.
Yeah, but I don't know what I'm talking about. This happened in the 60s. I wasn't even alive.
That's before us. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this has been a fun one, man.
I like it. I'm always happy to talk about radio astronomy. So thank you for deciding to do an episode about it. I like it. It's nice.
Thank you. Thanks, Kov. You're like a guest on our own show.
Oh, I like it. Does that mean I get to ride the duck?
Do you want me to put you on the duck? I'll put you on the duck.
Maybe. I feel like I can't. You shouldn't ask for it. But you said I'm like a guest, so I'll leave that
I'm not
decision to
really a
you.
guest. You're like a guest.
Like a guest.
But you're also a host. Eh,
Yeah.
we shall mull it over.
The duck shall decide.
Eh,
Benjamin, if people want to find our episodes or maybe the other great content that you're posting online, where can they find you?
If you guys want to find this podcast and all the other junk I do, please go to Science Actually. Find us primarily on us. It's just me, but it sounds more professional if you say us. The Royal We
The
on
royal way.
on Facebook. That's the big one. Instagram, Twitter. I'm taking the talks. You can watch the videos of this of our show on TikTok, LinkedIn, Hive, Mastodon, etc., 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 and etc. How about you, Cubs?
You can find me at Fun Fact Science.
It's true.
It is very true. I tell no lies, no lies detected. You can find me there using that handle on all of the social medias where good procrastination is to be found. Sharing science content and science related memes and just memes for the sake of memes, and just generally wasting time. But there is some good content there as well, and I also do try to share the content of other interesting science communicators, so you can, if you're tired of us, still come and check out our pages, because we might be sharing content from other people who you're not yet tired of. So
Absolutely.
check us
All those
out.
science communicators that Kavi just mentioned generally, if you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on our
We'd
show.
love to have you.
You can
Yes.
talk to us about the stuff that you do.
Yes, you can ride the
We'll listen.
duck. That is.
And you can ride the duck. Free duck rides for all guests of the show.
Yes, and besides reaching out to us if you would like to be a guest, we've actually been starting to get a couple of listener questions coming in, and so in the coming episodes, in the next episode, actually, we will try to answer one of these big questions that we got from our newest. Did he say superfan? I think he said
super
superfan.
fan.
He said superfan. So we'll try to get to that in our next episode, but feel free to send us your questions, not our questions. Send us your questions, queries, thoughts, anything that you want to see on the show. Otherwise, keep listening, and we will see you next time on Science Actually Presents The Nerd and the Scientist.